Hey, it's Josh, Rome Real Eat. So today I was at Winn-Dixie doing some grocery shopping, and they had New York strips and ribeyes, grass-fed, on sale for $7.99 a pound, which is really unheard of these days. So I grabbed two 4-packs, so I got 8 steaks for $7.99 a pound, which is awesome for me. I told some friends the same thing, that they were on sale, and one said to me, well, I don't know how to cook a steak. Every time I make a steak, I always mess it up, and I promised them I would make a video on how to cook a steak the right way. Now, when it comes to cooking a steak, a lot of people they do too much. So it's really not that hard. It's really simple to cook, and most people mess up probably the first step, which is letting the meat come up to room temperature and not cooking it cold. And then they really, seasoning wise, they go crazy and they just destroy a steak. So I'm going to show you how to cook a steak the right way, and I'm going to make some finishing butter, and let's see how it is. All right, so first thing we want to do is season this steak. You don't want the steak to be cold, so you want it to be room temperature. And when you're doing that is a good time to season the steak. So really simple. Salt, black pepper. Now, another trick when you get to here, do not take a fork and stab the steak to turn it over here or in the pan. Anytime when you're cooking a steak, you want to build a crust all around the steak. And if you start stabbing it with the fork, you're breaking that crust and it's not trapping the moisture inside, the juices inside. So again, nothing hard. Let the steak come up to room temperature. Salt, black pepper. Don't stab it with a fork. What you want to do is get a pair of tongs and flip it over. And then salt, black pepper. What you can do here, if you want to, some black pepper on this side of it, some black pepper over there, some salt on this side, some salt over there. And then again, you can take your tongs, and if you're fast enough, you can pat this side down with the salt and black pepper, and then you can pat this side down of the steak with the salt and black pepper too. So now we're not going to touch this steak again until it gets up to room temperature. Okay, so I already had this steak sitting out a little bit before I started the video. However, one of the reasons you put the salt and black pepper on while it's coming down to room temperature, so it could suck the seasoning into the steak. So with HexClad, you want to cook low to medium heat. So we're going to let that build up. What we're going to use in the pan, I've already got some avocado oil in there, and we're going to throw in a couple pieces of butter. And so what this is going to do is, the avocado oil is a high temperature oil, high smoke point. So the avocado oil will keep it from smoking real fast, because butter will burn if you don't do that, if you don't put like a higher smoke point oil in there with it. So we're going to let this pan get up to temperature with our avocado oil and our butter. So one thing I am going to do, and this is, if you want to try something and you've never done it before, give it a try. I know you can go to some restaurants when you order a steak and you can request finishing butter. Carrabba's is one of them. So what you can do is, what I like to use is the Traeger beef rub. But you can also use this seasoning, if you've ever used, like the restaurants have the Parmesan and herb seasoning that you mix with olive oil to dip your bread in. You can use that seasoning too, and it's outstanding. So I'm going to put a little bit of Traeger beef rub in here with this butter. And we're going to let that soften up. And we are going to mix that up. So now, one thing that fuels me while I'm cooking a steak is a good old fashioned. So it's never a bad day when you have an old fashioned and a steak. So the butter is melting. It's starting to bubble a little bit. When it bubbles a little more, I know I'm getting closer to that temperature I want the pan to be at. And I'm going to put a little bit more butter in there because I want to be able to baste the steak after it's in there and I flip it. And you can see how it's bubbling. So when this butter gets finished, we're going to put it in there. And so to make your finishing butter, you just want to mash your seasoning in with the butter. And as it gets closer to room temperature, it'll become easier to mix together. And you don't have to use a finishing butter. I don't always, but sometimes I get a wild hair and decide to mix some up to put on my steak. All right, so that butter is sizzling. It tells me I'm getting really close to the temperature to put my steak in. Again, you don't use a fork to pick your steak up. Rookie move. Place your steak in the pan. And for me, I like a medium rare steak, so I'm looking between 4 and 5 minutes. So we're going to watch the clock here. So when that says 147, we're going to flip it over. Okay, so when I said 4 to 5 minutes per side, I'm talking about a 1-inch thick steak. If you get a steak that's thicker, you want to, of course, cook it a little bit longer, maybe at a little bit lower temperature. But on a thicker steak, the thicker the meat, the more crucial it is to get that steak closer to room temperature. So we're at 147. Now we're going to flip this steak over. And that's the sear we want to see, this crust on the outside layer of the steak. So we're going to leave that here. We're not going to turn it. And we're going to come back about, 153, 154, and we're going to pull it off. Now, one thing you do want to do is put the extra butter in there, right? So every once in a while, just like a piece of fish, put the pan to the side, pick some of that butter up, and pour it over the steak. You'll thank me later. All right, so we're going to do a couple things here. One thing we're going to do is switch out our cutting board for a clean one. And we're going to mix this finishing butter up a little bit. It softens up. You can mix the seasoning into it a little bit better. And you don't want any streaks. You want it to look like cinnamon butter from Roadhouse, Texas Roadhouse. That's what you want. All right, so we're at 4.5 minutes. The steak's done, right? So it's ready to come off. We're going to put some more butter on here. So that's why I'm trying to drizzle off whatever butter I can. All right, we flipped the steak one time and then we took it off. So we're done there. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this finishing butter that we made and I'm gonna put it on top of this steak. I'm gonna spread it around a little bit. And I'm gonna leave it. All right, so the finishing butter is going to just soak into the steak here. You don't have to use the finishing butter, like I said. If you just want to, that steak is perfect just the way it is. You have to trust the process. You don't want to keep flipping the steak over and over. You don't want to poke it with anything. One thing you don't want to do is try to cut it open with a knife and see what it looks like inside. You just have to trust the process. Just like a football coach is going to tell you. You have to just follow the process and trust in the process. So what's happening right now is I let my steak sit for half of the time that it was in the pan cooking. So we did 4 to 5 minutes each side. I'm gonna let this sit here for, let's see, we did 8 to 10 minutes. I'm gonna let this sit here for 5 minutes and cool back down to room temperature. So there's a lot of juice. If you've ever cut a steak open before, right after it's come off the grill or out of a pan, you cut it open and juice runs everywhere. If you cut it open, that juice is going to drain out. You have to trust your char on the outside to hold that in, and you want that steak to cool down. With steak, concrete, anything else that's porous, you want it, as it cools down, it's going to suck in. As it heats up, it pushes air out. So that's why you want to let it cool down. You want to trap those moisture, all that moisture and all that juice inside. And we're going to come back and cut this steak open, and you're going to see what I'm talking about. All right, so we're going to cut this steak open and see how juicy it is and see what it's like on the inside. Now, I know somebody's going to say, well, yeah, all that juice when you cut it open is all the butter you put on it, the finishing butter you put on it while it was cooling down. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a clean cutting board just to see. So I'm going to pick the steak up, and I'm going to let the butter that was all over it, the finishing butter, drain off of it. And we're going to use a clean cutting board. All right, so here's the moment of truth. We're going to sharpen our knife blade up a little bit. It's always good. To have a sharp knife. Now I'm going to use my hands because I'm eating this myself. But let's see. There you go. Crust on the outside, pink in the middle, and if you push, the juices come out. So another thing you could use if you want to make like a pasta with a steak on top of it, from this point, you just slice. And there, you've got your sliced steak to go on top of your pasta. And that's how you properly cook a steak.